Welcome everybody, welcome to the Sydney Passenger September meeting. It's wonderful to see you all. I'm glad you could all make it on this, what is a fine day in Sydney. I hope the weather's going to be fine for you others in it's early morning where you are, or late at night for tomorrow morning. I'd like to welcome a new member attending her first meeting, Melanie Lopez. Welcome Melanie, hope you enjoy your time with us. As well as our local members, we have passengers joining from the UK, New Zealand, the Czech Republic and the USA. And we have guests joining us from Canada and the USA. Our presenter for this meeting is passenger Anthony Richards. It sounds like he's a busy man. As well as holding down a full-time occupation as a scientist and lecturer, he also owns the Baker Street Studios, which has 2 book brands, a murder mystery event division, and he runs the Inspector Moore Society as well as his Sherlock Holmes activities. So welcome, Anthony. Glad you could join us and give us the benefit of your insights as a Sherlockian publisher. We are recording this meeting, and after suitable editing will be available to everybody via our YouTube channel. I'll let all the members know when that recording is available to view. If anybody would not like to be recorded, please let me know and we will try to edit you out. A little bit of news on the media at the moment. The new Enola Holmes movie will screen on Netflix on the 4th of November. The eagerly awaited Enola Holmes 2. Still as yet, we don't know what the title will be, but we're told it's based on the Nancy Springer books. Henry Cavill will reprise his role as Sherlock. And but that doesn't appear to be a Mycroft this time, so we'll have to wait and see what other cast members, apart from the stars that we know about, will appear. Sherlock Holmes 3, the long-anticipated 3rd movie in the Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law franchise, remains in development, with a long-standing rumour that Johnny Depp will be involved, has now been squashed well and truly. Also continuing in development are the 2 TV movies series for HBO Max that are a spin-off from the Sherlock Holmes Downey Jr. franchise. So both Mr. and Mrs. Downey have been named as executive producers of those 2 TV series. So we wait to see what they turn out. And as for a new BBC Sherlock series, I think we can put that one to bed at last. The latest news have been rumours and teasers for many years now that a series 5 would eventuate. But latest news I've seen is a media article offering the opinion that it would now be a waste of time to take it any further. So I think that one's well and truly over and done with by now. So if anybody's got any show and tell items, please put your hand up and flash it on screen. I've got nothing to show. Lee's always good for that. Lee, you're on mute, so please unmute yourself and show us what you've got. Okay.
I've got a few things. None of them new, but anyway, just for a bit of fun. I'm sure everybody has this in their library. I had a copy many years ago, but I got another one recently from Thrift Books in America. The World Bibliography of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. I had the companion volume and I decided I needed this one again. I used for reference and I'm happy to have it again. And yes, that one. This one is another old book, a collection of pastiches. And not everybody likes Holmes pastiches. Not naming any names, but Roseanne's not here, so I'll name her. It's edited by Marvin Kay. This one came out in 1996, so quite a while ago, The Resurrected Holmes. And it's a curious conceit, this one. It's unpublished cases of Holmes. Not an unusual idea, that one, but the idea here is that 15 legendary Holmes tales as written by famous authors. ranging from Ernest Hemingway through Ellery Queen, Somerset Maugham, H.P. Lovecraft, Mickey Spillane, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Rex Stout, and others. But of course, actually written by other authors, modern day authors. So that's really quite fun, that one, The Resurrected Holmes, edited by Marvin Kay, for those who do appreciate, you know, Holmesian parodies and pastiches. And this is another thing I got hold of a little while ago, 4 stories from the Casebook on CD audio, and read by Christopher Lee. And does that show up? Yeah. This one was on HarperCollins audio, and I'm quite happy about this one because it turned up in a very broken sort of double CD case, and I managed to replace the case recently, so it's all shiny and it looks like new. But it's a good reading. Christopher Lee's up there with, in my opinion, with Stephen Fry and some of the other good readers of Holmes stories, so recommended. That's all from me.
Thank you, Lee. Anybody else got anything to show us?
I've got nothing to show as such, but I just want to talk about the next log. So some of you may have noticed that the second log of the year hasn't come out yet. That's because we're doing a double issue for the what will be the middle and the end of the year log. So that should be coming out within the next month, with any luck. So I'd like to thank everybody who sent me through stuff for that to make up numbers of articles needed for a double issue. I'd also like to thank Lee for helping out with the editing and joining the editorial team for us, which has been very welcome to have another set of eyes across things, and also start to tidy up some of the sort of style guide type anomalies that that have emerged over time. So I just want to let everyone know that the log is coming. Just waiting for those last couple of things. And thanks, Doug. I've got your article now as well. So yeah, something to look forward to shortly.
Can you hear me, Bill?
Yes, Roseanne, I can hear you.
Oh, you can. Oh, when Lee said I wasn't here, I thought maybe I wasn't.
Oh, you are here, Roseanne. Sorry. Oh, apologies.
No, that's perfectly all right. You didn't say anything too nasty, so that's fine. Thanks. Speaking of the log, I won't have something for this time, but for the next log, because I'm going to actually be in London in November, and I noticed the Sherlock Holmes Society of London will be having the annual film evening, so I've booked a ticket for that, so I'll report on that, but it won't be in time for this log, obviously.
Very good. Thank you, Roseanne. As is the tradition for our Sydney Passengers News, we like to look at the dates of the canonical stories that occurred around this time of the year. So on the 6th of September 1903, The Adventure of the Creeping Man took place. On the 7th of September 1889 was The Adventure of the Engineer's Thumb. On the 11th of September 1889, this day, that was the beginning of The Adventure of the Crooked Man. And on the 12th of September 1888, The Adventure of the Greek Interpreter. So a very busy period for Holmes and Watson this time of the year, in those particular years. So lots of activities taking place around September. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Anthony Richards, our guest presenter for the day. He's going to talk about how not to be a Sherlockian publisher. Thank you, Anthony. Take it away.
Great. So, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever is appropriate to you. For me, it's certainly good morning. It might be a very fine day there in Sydney, you said, but here it's actually pitch black because it's only just gone 5 a.m. in the morning. I hope in the next, I was told it should be about an hour long, and if I speak at 1 slide per minute, it will be an hour long, but please do ask questions as I go through. In fact, I will be asking the audience some questions as well. I will pick up Captain Bill on one thing. He said he highlighted a member who was attending their first Sydney Passengers meeting. There's actually another one as well, me. This is my first meeting as well, although I've been a member for many years. So as you can see, I'm Anthony Richards, no H in Antony, which I always think is both a blessing and a curse for me. It's a blessing because when I'm publishing things, if I get a prospective author who corresponds with me and they keep putting the H in, I know that their attention to detail possibly isn't as good as it should be, and I'm more wary when I read their manuscript. Anyway, let's start. So, as I said, I have been a Sydney passenger for many years. So, as such, I should know all about Australia. However, I'm very sorry, but my entire knowledge of Australia, having never been there, is limited to the following. So, according to me, all the men look like that guy on the top left there. All the women look like her. And it must be very easy to date in Australia because I believe all women are called Sheila. You like a fair bit of beer, nothing wrong with that. I know your water goes down the plug hole the wrong way. You're very good at building very fine structures, whether they be bridges or very strange opera houses. You have lots of cute and cuddly creatures, and you have one or two down the bottom there that aren't so cute or cuddly and you wish to avoid. And you have these curious things here at the bottom left, which when we in the UK throw them, they don't come back. So we have another name for your boomerang. We call it a stick, because it doesn't come back. And we also know you have to use various terminologies. So I'm afraid I should have said good day, mate, no worries, blow the froth off the couple, etc., etc. And of course, from Boscombe Valley, cooey. So I probably got that one right, if nothing else. Also, as a Sydney passenger, I should be used to ships. But up until 2015, I'd never actually been on a ship. In fact, the largest thing I'd ever been on was that, which is the Woolwich Ferry in London that goes a grand distance of less than a quarter of a mile across the River Thames. Something that the bill didn't say was something I have done in the past. I was employed by Cunard, the shipping company, as one of their lecturers on the Queen Mary 2. This is actually the basis of the presentation I'm giving you now. And when I got this gig on the Queen Mary, as I said, I'd never been on a ship before, so I phoned them up and I asked them, you know, what is your ship like? Will it be like this? And they said, oh no, as is an absolutely huge ship by comparison. You'll be quite all right on our ship, because I was actually afraid of being seasick. So I thought again. I thought, well, will it be like this, your ship? And they assured me it was nothing like this, and it was a very luxurious ship, they told me. And to me, having travelled a fair bit on business, this is what I always ask myself, whether it would be luxury like this. And they assured me that it was far better than this could be. And then I'm reminded of plane travel, and I thought, well, will it be as luxurious as this airline that I believe you have, which is equivalent to the one we call Ryanair? But I noted this one was in the top 10, apparently, of worst airlines in the world. But knowing it's nothing like that, I did the gig, and the first thing you're always asked, and Bill's already really done this for me, they'll say, oh, who are you? Where do you come from? Tell us your life story. So I'm only going to say very little about myself, except as it says there, I come from a long line of people who are now dead, which is quite true. But if you really want to know about me, and you can take this afterwards, from the age of 1962, and if you look up in the newspapers, you'll see I was born on the same day as Raquel Welch, Bob Newhart, the comic, Lord Delfont, the theatre impresario, Jesse James, the outlaw, John Wisdom, the cricketer, and Louis XIV. And how wonderful that is if I have the looks of Raquel Welch, the wit of Bob Newhart, the cricketing prowess of John Wisdom. However, I'm very much afraid I've probably got the looks of John Wisdom and the humour of Louis XIV, etc., etc. So I make no apology for that. By trade, as Bill told you, I'm actually a scientist. I'm a biophysicist and crystallographer. I've worked at King's College in London, Birkbeck, the Royal Institution, and so on, done work for people like Cancer Research, chemical companies such as ICI, which no longer exist, but spent most of my working life for an American company called Accelris doing molecular modeling. They were based in San Diego in the States, hence I got a fair bit of travel, and these other companies here. And I have lectureships at the Open University for about 20 something years now, and University of Oxford, one you might have heard of. My life changed irreparably in 2006 when James Anthony Edward, my son, came along. And here I'll say one thing, just to embarrass the captain here, what a great chap he is, because when my son was born, he was the first one to not only send me a card, but he sent a little kangaroo as well in the post, which we still have. Thank you very much for that. James is a bit old to play with it, but I still play with it occasionally. Unfortunately, James was diagnosed as being quite autistic, so I couldn't no longer fly around the world and do my full-time job. So I took up my hobbies, things I could do from home, and that included publishing books, murder mysteries, writing, tours, filming, and mainly talking about myself. On other things, anybody who collects stamps, even Australian ones, railway travel, London, Oxford, bit about Sherlock Holmes, Inspector Morse, I'm the person. I will say one thing, this is a complete aside here. I do have very great admiration and respect for Australia from a personal level. Because in 1980, I was on a family holiday in Portugal, and the coach I was on with my father, it's a family holiday, overturned. It rolled over several times, and my father, who nearly died in that, ended up half in the coach, half out the coach, being crushed by it. Everybody else ran off. There was no ambulances, no emergency services seemed to arrive in fact, they didn't arrive for over an hour. But something that did arrive, I was there, trying to get my father out from underneath the wreckage, and all of a sudden, standing next to me, and my memory might be playing tricks on me, was a Paul Hogan lookalike, a guy, an Australian, who said, "Are you in trouble, mate?" So I'll try and not do the accent too badly. "Are you in trouble? Do you want some help?" And I said, "Yeah, my father's stuck under here." He said, no worries, leave it to me. He is in a coach that had stopped behind our coach, and it was full of Australian tourists, and every single one of them got out. They lined up along the side of our coach, and they physically lifted the coach a few inches off the ground so my father could be pulled from the wreckage. And then as quick as that, the guy went up to my father, he said, "We'll soon have you back in Piccadilly Circus," with a beer or two, got back on the coach, and they were gone. So I'm very thankful to Australians in general. Anyway, enough sentimentality. I have several presentations I'm asked to give. The one we're going to do tonight is the publishing one, how not to be a publisher, and you can always invite us back for the others. So if you're going to be a publisher and you're just starting off in the middle of your life, where do you start? Well, I put it to you, you should do three things. You should pick to publish something you know about, something you enjoy as well. And before you commit your money to buying another company, perhaps you should do your research on it. So with that in mind, I chose Sherlock Holmes. Rules 1 and 2 were satisfied. It was something I knew a little bit about, something I enjoyed. But then the next question, what should I publish? Should I publish parody or pastiche? In fact, Bill has already mentioned pastiche isn't for everybody. There are those who won't even have it in the house, will not read it, etc. Should I write the canon, things on the canon, the writings on the writing, contributors to the canon, etc. What should I do? So I had to go and find out both what would I enjoy doing and what would possibly sell. Well, we could always start with the untold stories, couldn't we? There's over 100 of them mentioned in the canon, 61 of those involving Holmes himself. And we're all very familiar with these, aren't we? Everything from, the Abernethy family one with the parsley, how Father Parsley had sunk in the butter. There's quite a few books on the giant rat of Sumatra, etc., etc. So perhaps we could do those. They might seem a little bit old hat, but there was plenty of scope at least for stories. So what should I do? Go and find out from the experts. And at that time, I didn't necessarily know of the Sydney Passengers, otherwise I'd have inquired there as well, but certainly the Sherlock Holmes Society of London, the Sherlock Holmes Society of France, the Franco-Midland Hardware Company of France was very prominent in those days, and of course the Baker Street Irregulars. So I contacted all these people, and well, it's a little bit of a shock, because you have to ask yourself as a business person, would you invest in people who dress up like this lot in the bottom right hand corner and have breakfast in Victorian costume in swimming pools? I mean, you know, would you, are they really going to be your best purchasers? And of course there's the rather more serious lot, the bottom left there, the Baker Street the BSI meeting. There's the Franco Midland Hardware Company of the UK, which was run by Philip Weller, who was a little bit of an egocentric person, and various other people. And I came to the conclusion very early on that we probably weren't going to make a lot of money out of this, but it would be a fun thing to do. So my actual initial conclusion was there is no conclusion at all. Everybody tends to like a different aspect of this hobby, as I'm going to call it, of ours. Some people like pastiche, some people don't, but there's room for everybody in every flavour they want. Some are very serious collectors. People like Richard Lancelin Green was a great collector of our time and would have any thing, whether rubbish or not. He certainly took all of our books on. Others were a little bit egotistical, like Philip Weller, I said, and some did it just for fun. And I don't know if any of you know the guy in the bottom right there, now passed away, a wonderful character called Vosper Arthur, was one of the founders, I think, of the Poor Folks Upon the Moor, was quite a hero, in fact. He was a submarine captain from World War II, used to wear a monocle, used to run the poor folks with a rod of iron. In fact, he used to have the maxim that the official part of any Sherlock Holmes meeting should last for no longer than 7%. He very much abided by the 7% solution, as he said, for meetings. And he was a great encouragement to us in the early days. And then I'm sure you don't know the lady on the left. And she is the lady who actually got me into Sherlock Holmes to start with. Her name, more formally, is the Countess Ledanka Vachadlo, Czechoslovakian countess. And again, we're going back to my university days. I was tasked to give a lecture for a conference at University of Oxford, and there was a prize for the best student presentation, the most outrageous presentation. And I decided I would do it as Sherlock Holmes. I'd never read a Sherlock Holmes novel at that time, but I made all the usual cliches of Elementary, My Dear Watson. There was a poster that went with this. And during the poster session, this lady came up to me and said, "Oh, you must be a great fan of Sherlock Holmes." And of course, lying through my teeth, I said, "Oh, yes, I know all about Sherlock Holmes." I said, "Oh, good," she said, "I'm a member of the Sherlock Holmes Society. Would you like to come with me as my guest to the Sherlock Holmes ball, the Sherlock Holmes Society of London's ball," she called it, at the Café Roy in a few weeks' time. And who could resist such an offer from such a glamorous lady? I went along. I remember it was the year they had Anthony Hopkins as guest speaker. I was entranced by the whole affair and asked how I could sign up there and then. And my love of Sherlock Holmes has continued since that moment. Unfortunately, it didn't continue quite so long for the Countess, but we're still friends. So that's how I got into Sherlock Holmes, really for all the wrong reasons. And we also point out there are really very few professional Holmesians out there, even less Sherlockians. And I assume we know the difference between a Holmesian and a Sherlockian. I'll assume you do. So you've got Antony. Oh, okay. We always say that Holmesians are British people who are interested in Holmes, because we would never dare refer to Holmes by anything but his surname, not unless we've known him for at least 200 years. Sherlockians we usually regard as Americans because they are far less formal in their approach. So as I said, there's very few Holmesians and even less Sherlockians. A few you might have are Anthony Horowitz, who I'm sure you know, who's done several, or two, I think, is it 2 professional books? But then he's a professional writer. He's done Agatha Christie ones, he's done, you know, Ian Fleming ones, founder of Midsummer Murders. He didn't write the books for that, but he did do the screen adaptations of the early series. So although he has a love of Sherlock Holmes, he is a professional writer and has written just for the money. So he's obviously made money out of it. I don't know if you recognise the next one, David Stuart Davies. I think if I click on the pen, I get a pointer, don't I? Oops. Oh, no, I don't. Never mind. Hang on. Oh, if I click on the pen, it goes to the next slide. Anyway, I should go back one. David Stewart Davies, one of the founders of the Northern Musgraves, a very great guy. We do work with him still. Very knowledgeable on Holmes, and also writes his plays and his books as well. Otto Penzler in New York, Mysterious Bookshop, again, a professional Holmesian. Not necessarily the most generous guy in the world. I remember he did a book not on Holmes, but he asked for various contributors on murder mysteries, and he publishes the book on it. And one of those contributors was Colin Dexter, you know, the author of Morse, also a great friend of mine, the late Colin. And I was with Colin one day, and he said, "Look at this." He was absolutely, I never really saw Colin in a temper or a mood, except on this occasion, because Otto had sent him his royalty check for this book, and Colin had written a whole story, a short story for him. And he said the total he got back from it was this check for 37 cents. He said, "I can't even cash the damn thing." He said it'll cost me, you know, $10 to cash it. So he, Otto did have a reputation. And then the final one there, I don't think you'll recognise, that is Martin Breeze, who was the founder of Breeze Books, which we were later to take over. And he was quite a jolly guy. He was actually a magician by trade, who'd gone into publishing and had started off doing magic books. And then one of his great friends and also magician, Vel Andrews, had started writing Sherlock Holmes, and he actually started publishing the Vel Andrews stories, and then from there on it took off. So there's very few professional ones, and it's true to say very few people have actually made much money from Sherlock Holmes, despite there being approximately one new book a week on Sherlock Holmes being published, and despite, of course, Sherlock Holmes being the most filmed character of all time. Most of those films have never seen a profit. So it's not probably the best area to go into as a publisher. But anyway, we looked around and we came across this company, Breeze Books. I've just mentioned it. It was established in 1992. It had about 50 books in print at the time. It had 15,000 stock of books, which sounded wonderful. It had operations in the USA and Europe. There were 8 unpublished manuscripts, and it purported to be £100,000 business a year. There was a customer database of many thousands, etc., etc. And it was up for sale. Martin Breeze approached us and said, you know, perhaps you'd like to buy it. It seemed like a very good idea at the time. So in 2004, Breeze Books became part of the newly formed Baker Street Studios. And I ask you, what on earth could go wrong? Well, I'll tell you what could go wrong. We changed the logo slightly. So I said it was established in 1992. It was. It had 50 books in print. It had a stock of 15,000. That was an absolute disaster for the company, because those 15,000 were mainly in the United States in a warehouse. And what happens in the book trade in the United States, if you go along to somebody like Barnes and Noble and you say, "Oh, we've got a new book coming out, would you like to stock it?" Barnes and Noble will say, "Yes, send us 6 copies for each of our 200 and something stores," whatever it was they had. And you think, "Oh, well, that's good. I've sold a few thousand already." You send out the books, you send them an invoice, and then you get told, "Well, you should have read the small print, because anything we have from you is always on sale or return after 6 months. And if after 6 months your books haven't sold, even if they've been dog-eared and so on by people thumbing them through on the shelves, or even if we haven't even put them out in the bookstore, you have to pay to have them returned to you, and the return postage is probably more than the book's worth in the first place." And that's why he had 15,000 books in stock. Most of those 15,000 comprise of about half a dozen titles, all of which had been returned by Barnes and Noble and others. They were sitting there in, I think it was New York somewhere. And of course, the warehouse is charging you each month to hold that stock, with very little being sold. So the US part of the operation was virtually nil and hemorrhaging money. Europe was slightly better. We had a few thousand books there, but again, the books we inherited, we should have asked for the inventory a little bit sooner, I feel, again, was among about half a dozen books. The 8 unpublished titles, well, I found out why they were unpublished. Basically because they weren't the best books in the world, and the manuscripts had been put at the bottom of the heap for a very good reason. So that was something we could wipe off. The £100,000 business, well, that I believe, and I should have been used to this in the book trade, was what you might call a work of fiction made up by the accountants. If you take a naught off that, you get to what the business was really doing every year. It was more like 10,000. It was pure accountancy. And the customer database, well, we did use the customer database when we had it, and most of the people on the database had moved on or were dead. It was one of these, it wasn't really a true customer database. It was one of these that had been bought from elsewhere, so that it wasn't targeted to Sherlock Holmes people. So really a complete disaster. So what did we do? We published the best of the unpublished ones, The Giant's Hand, Matthew Booth, that came out. Then the next shock was the following month, Val Andrews died. He was the mainstay author. At least half of the books, the Breeze book, were Val Andrews ones. He was a great guy, Val Andrews. I only got to meet him once. He lived in a caravan, a mobile home, I think you'd call it, in the middle of Essex. And he very took Sherlock Holmes to heart, in that you literally had to cut your way through the smoke getting into his van. He was a big pipe smoker, but unfortunately he died. Then Murder One, the biggest bookshop, murder mystery bookshop in London, that folded and went into liquidation. They had actually been keeping Breeze books going by having their books. One sort of highlight we had was a company called Bibliophile Books. They're a remaindered book company. They took our books at sort of 10 cents on the dollar, but we were at least able to get rid of that huge stockpile that we had. So I guess that was a good thing. And the rest of the stock, I thought, well, we run these murder mysteries. If we give out the books as prizes at the murder mysteries, well, we'll soon get rid of them, I thought, until I did my mathematics and worked out it would be approximately 50 years before I'd get rid of them all. So that wasn't too good either. We went to the Frankfurt Book Fair and the London International Book Fair that charge you several £1,000s to attend. And we were completely unprepared. What you get if you go to either of these, if you don't have a large stand, they give you something like a card table, you know, about 2'6" by 2'6". You sit there in the middle of a big hall among hundreds of other tables, and you hope that somebody will come past. And unless, as we did on the second day, you dress up as Sherlock Holmes, no one's going to find you or see you. And unless you're already well known, you probably won't get any appointments. So they didn't go down too well for us. Foreign rights, you know, selling in Chinese or Japanese, that's still ongoing, but less of that, I think, these days. We do get some strange requests. We have sold in Russian and we've sold in Estonia. Apparently Sherlock Holmes is big in Estonia, and I've no idea why, but quite a few of our books have been translated to Estonian. And then the large print rights for partially sighted people, that now is all but gone. Most people who would have read large print books now tend to either get it on an e-book reader, where of course you can increase the size of the font. So e-book readers are not our friend in that respect. So it's not looking very good, is it, for us as a company? So now let's do a little aside and talk a little bit about how the book trade works in general. And here I'm meaning, you know, large people like J.K. Rowling, because obviously we are not really in her league, as it were. So if we look at the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, it was published on the 21st of July 2007. It sold 11 million copies worldwide, 2.7 million of those in the UK. And I'm sure you're thinking, that sounds like any author would like to have that number of copies sold, wouldn't you? But it's better than that. Its 11 million copies were sold on the 21st of July 2007. on that one single day. There were actually 65 million copies sold worldwide to date. In fact, the data of most of this presentation is about 2017, so even more by now. And of course, there's also the film, The Deathly Hallows, 1 billion sales for the film version. And The Deathly Hallows wasn't a popular book by Harry Potter standards. The Philosopher's Stone, the first one, has sold 120 million copies to date, so approximately double what The Deathly Hallows sold. So does that mean, this is a very silly question here, does that mean that book made a profit, do you think? I hope you're all nodding that it did.
Yes,
How much did the book cost to actually produce, do you think? And how much did the book actually sell for? I'm open to offers here from the audience. How much do you think the book cost to be? And it's a 300 and something page book, so it's a fairly meaty book.
Good question.
Anybody want to have a guess? No? Okay, I shall continue on. 60 cents, 38 pence. We couldn't even buy the paper for that publication at that price. They were all printed in China en masse, million at a time, and then shipped on large container boats to wherever they needed to be in the world. So, you know, the profit margin is huge. The book retail price went from £24 if you wanted a special cover, limited edition cover, down to £4.99 for the paperback, the airport copy of it. The average recommended retail price of the hardback first edition, £17.99. However, nobody paid that because before the book was even published, everywhere was offering a 40% discount on it. The author generally gets around 10% of the retail price. So J.K. Rowling did make quite a few pennies on that publication. So you can see there is big money to be made in the book industry, but not necessarily in the Sherlock Holmes. For our books, if we sell a few hundred of each one in a year, we are doing very well. Some of them don't even sell 10 copies a year. So you can see the difference. So now I am going to ask the audience a question. I would like you to tell me, without looking up on the internet, what do you think are the 10 all-time top books by sales? And we'll see how good you are. I'll give you a minute for this, which will give me time to have to slurp of my cup of tea. Moriarty, I should say.
The Bible, Christian Bible.
Okay, very good. Anybody else?
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, very good.
Pilgrim's
Yep,
Progress.
Pilgrim's. Oh yes, that would, yes.
Agatha Christie's. What is it? The Murder of Roger Ackroyd.
Right, the first one. Yeah. They're good suggestions. Any more takers, and then we'll see if you're right.
I'm guessing To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Certainly, we've all heard of it, haven't we? Okay, shall I tell you the answers? And again, this is sort of 2017 data, but here we are. So, Holy Bible is on there, and Agatha Christie is there, not the one you said, but And Then There Were None is apparently her top-selling one. Lord of the Rings, whoever said that, full marks there. You've got to have some Dickens in there, haven't you? And of course, there has to be a Harry Potter one. As I mentioned earlier on, Philosopher's Stone at 120 million is quite good. Now, I have lied to you because one of those books doesn't belong there. Which one of those do you think isn't one of the top 10 books by sales of all time?
Dream at the Red Chamber.
No.
Ah.
The Bible, because the Bibles are usually given away.
Yeah.
By the Gideon's International. It is true that it's one of the top 10 printed in the world, but not so sorry Captain, I managed to, you fell into my trap there that I put there. Now I've put the word tires next to it. That's to remind me to ask you another question. Who do you think is the world's largest producer of automobile tires? Is it, you know, Pirelli? Is it Goodyear? Is it the Michelin Man? Who do you think is the world's largest producer of tires for cars?
Lego.
Yes, you knew it. I didn't fool you there. Yeah, Lego produces more tires for models than anybody else put together. If I had a prize, I would give it to you, but I haven't, so I won't. So what do people read most? Is it fiction? Is it factual things? Is it murder mystery? Is it biographies? Is it academic books? Is it pornography? What is it you think that people read most? By sales. I open it to you.
Fiction.
Fiction.
Fiction, okay. Anybody else want to have a vote for fiction or disagree with that? I warn you, the next slide has some partial nudity on it. Well, you're wrong, it's not fiction. It's celebrity books and biographies. And as an example, this lady here, who goes by two names, she's actually called Katie Price, but goes under the name of Jordan, who's a model and celebrity, what do you call it, reality, TV reality star. So 80% of book sales come towards Christmas in a year. What we call White Monday, the first Monday in November, is the biggest day for sales for books in a year. And of those, they are dominated by celebrity books. Katie Price herself, as you can see, she's big in that world. In fact, she's big in every sense of the word, in every world, it would seem. She has written, would you believe, 41 biographies and fiction books to date. And as a sample of her literary writing, I've got a passage here. I'm not sure if you have this. We have this TV, a reality one called I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, that's filmed in Australia. I don't know if they show it over there as well, but she was one of the contestants in the Australian jungle, and she wrote about her experiences afterwards. And this is a passage from her best-selling book. My joke in the jungle about him having an acorn-sized one had thankfully been wildly off the mark. Less of an acorn, more of an oak. Well, you know, who would say that isn't the finest literature you're going to find that particular year? So that's the thing. So I should go on to the next slide, otherwise it becomes too distracting for some of us. So, for 2015, 3 million titles published a year in the USA. The number of titles being published is going up and up, 50% more in the last 10 years, but the number of books actually sold is reducing by about 20% a year. And of the number of copies sold, about 260 million copies a year are fiction books that are sold. An average book sale is under 100 books a year. As I was saying, our Sherlock Holmes ones, if we sell several, hundred of a book in a year when it first comes out, to us that's a bestseller. And on average, a book's sales during a lifetime is about 3,000 copies. If you get to there, you are doing pretty good, actually. If you go to a bookstore, because there are so many books being published, only about 1% of titles actually get stocked by stores around the world. So 99% of books published never get to see a bookstore. There's 10 million titles in print in English at any one time. And I said, and again, the 1% thing, again, only 1% of titles ever make a profit. So as it says there, another interesting fact, only 63 of the 1,000 business books printed in 2011 sold more than 5,000 copies and made a profit. And of business books, there are 250,000 current titles that you can choose from, all on the same topic. So there's a lot of competition out there, isn't there? Usually, authors pay for publicity. This isn't your J.K. Rowling's. This is an ordinary author like you or I. They're asked to pay for their publicity. Bestsellers are not done on book sales usually. So when you go into, I don't know, what's your big chain of bookstores called in Australia? I don't know.
One called Dymocks or Angus and Robinson.
or let's say Angus thing, because I can remember. So if you go to Angus and Robertson, they'll probably have a bestsellers of the week display or a top 10 ranking. So those aren't on what they've sold. They're on anticipated sales, and it's anticipated sales because authors can buy their spot in that listing if they want to. In fact, if you go to the BBC web pages, there was an article on there just a couple of weeks ago highlighting the sharp practices, well actually not sharp, general practices of booksellers, and in particular in this case it was W.H. Smith's, who's a national retailer over here. W.H. Smith's charged the author, they charged them £2,000 to have the book of the week slot in a given store. So they make money out of it, and they say, oh yes, well, it's on projected sales. Yes, this is our recommended book of the week. No one's ever read it at W.H. Smith's. They don't necessarily have reviewers, but if you pay them £2,000, you can be the book of the week. Advances to authors are very rare. And if you're an ordinary, this sounds absolutely awful to me. Authors will be paid anything between £500 to £2,000 a book for say their debut novel, if they're not a known author. And to me that sounds awful. You've probably spent 6 months to a year writing this manuscript, and you're going to get £500 back for it, and you'll never get a penny afterwards because you're selling the copyright as well. And this is where what they used to call vanity press or desktop publishing companies come in, and the new term these days is hybrid press companies, who will they'll publish the book for you, they'll charge you for publishing it, and thank you very much, they'll take your copyright as well. So if you make any money, they're going to make most of the money out of it. There's also the sales margins are going down and down over the last, 20 years or so. We started, 40% was the standard trade discount, and it's actually still what we give most retailers because we can't afford to give them more. But if you want your book in W.H. Smith's, you have to give them a 60% discount minimum, plus they charge you 45 pence per book for administration on top. Plus again, you have to send them the book with free postage and packing and free returns as well. So the margin that a publisher gets is really getting smaller and smaller. So is there any hope for the book trade in general, or for small independent publishers like us? And the answer is that there is in some ways. Espresso machines. Now, when I say an espresso machine, I don't mean a machine that makes you coffee in the morning. I mean this machine here at the bottom. This is a print-on-demand machine. There is one, I think, still at Foyles in London. It will have a database of books downloaded onto it. You go in, you look up the book you want, and it will print it there for you while you wait in about 3 to 5 minutes. So, in a print works such as we have, you have one machine that prints the actual internals of the book, the internal pages, usually in what's called a 16-up format, i.e. 16 pages at a time. They then go off to another machine that cuts it up and collates it into the book. And then you have a third machine that produces the cover. And sometimes that machine binds it as well, or you have to put it into another machine that does the perfect binding around it. These espresso machines do the whole thing in one. The product you get out isn't the best quality, but if you want just a reading copy of it, it's fine. It'll last about 6 months before the glue falls to bits and the book falls to bits as well. I don't have so much faith in espresso machines. The distributor we deal with does give you espresso machine royalties, and they're usually quite small each month. Kindle and such, they are good for us, apart from, as I said earlier on, large print, which has now all but disappeared. Kindle and ebooks, we sell, for every physical copy we probably sell 100 downloads. So, and although you might get 20-30 pence in the end for a download, it's better to have mass sales at 30 pence than physical sales at £1 or whatever it is. Print on demand as well, there's lots of these companies out there. The one that we use is probably one of the biggest ones, called Lightning Source. When things go right, they're great. When things go remotely wrong, they're horrendous to deal with. Something went wrong. We actually had somebody, might have been one of the members actually, who bought a book from Australia from us. So you have it sent out, and Lightning Source now have an operation in Australia. They actually have physical printing presses in Australia. So it's actually cheaper for me to order a book via Lightning Source in Australia to be sent than for me, even if I had the book free on my shelves. The postage to Australia is approximately £10 these days for a book, which negates any profit, and would mean we'd have to charge too much. So on this particular occasion, I log on to my Lightning Source account and I have it delivered to Australia very, very cheaply. What does Lightning Source do? Well, 6 weeks after the book had been ordered, I get an email from the customer saying the book hasn't arrived. What's happened? And it's supposed to arrive within 5 days. So I have to then go to Lightning Source. You fill out a form. The book has been lost. Da, 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 da. We'll investigate. We sent the book out, they said, and of course then we have to have another book sent out. And then 6 weeks later, the book actually turns up. What do Lightning Source do? They print the book in Australia. I have paid for airmail first class delivery, and that's what they did. They sent it from Australia to their hub in the UK, who then send it back to Australia via a ship. Which is why it takes 6 weeks. Does that make any logical business sense? And they do it all for virtually nothing. So it starts in Australia, it comes to the UK, and then it goes back again the slow way. So when things go wrong, they really go wrong. Audiobooks. Audiobooks is still a very stable market. I personally quite like audiobooks. And foreign rights is still a market as well. Chinese rights, the Chinese seem to be still very keen on reading everything. Italian and German rights seem to be the biggest ones for us. And I'm tempted to say under foreign rights, the USA as well, converting from English to American, but knowing there's some Americans listening, I better not say that. So here's another question for the audience. Which country has the most published authors, do you think, in the world? i.e. the number of authors per population size? And I warn you, the answer to this is rather like the Lego answer earlier. So would it be the UK, America, France, Germany?
I want to say the UK, but I don't know how true that is.
Well, I'd like to say the UK as well, but I shall tell you, it's Iceland. 10% of the population are published authors, but then Iceland only has a population of 250,000, and during the winter it gets dark very early there, so there's not a lot to do at night time. So a lot of authors in Iceland. Okay, let's go back to our own thing here. So who do you think, again, question to the audience, was responsible for the success of Sherlock Holmes? Was it the writing of Arthur Conan Doyle himself? Was it his South Sea patients, i.e. the patients not turning up, which gave him time to write the books in the first case? Was it that initial one in Beaton's Christmas Annual? Was it Greenhouse Smith, the editor of Strand magazine, or the great illustrations by Paget, or the public in general? Who do you think is most responsible for making the Sherlock Holmes stories the success that they still are today?
I would say Herbert Greenhouse Smith.
Okay. Anybody else want to? Yeah, I think you've got into the frame of mind now that most of my questions I ask are trick questions.
I am going to have to say Doyle.
Doyle, okay.
Mm.
No. All right, I shall take, this is a personal view, and of course, being my personal view, it's obviously the correct one. None of those. I would say it's two people. Isambard Kingdom Brunel being one of them. That's a bit tenuous, but W.H. Smith again, because it was W.H. Smith who got the concession at all the railway stations in London to have book stands put out. And you must remember the, as it says there, the murder mystery fiction is really quite a modern thing. It really only took off in the 1840s along with the railways. And this is a quote from W.H. Smith, who said, I think it's rather lovely, every edition to stock, every book they or magazine that they stocked was positively made upon the assumption that persons of a better class, who constitute the larger portion of railway readers, lose their accustomed taste the moment they enter the railway station. So, you know, Strand magazine was meant to be a throwaway thing that commuters would read. Conan Doyle was perfect because the stories were 8 to 16 pages. You would read it on your way to work or on the way home and then dispose of it. And that's why Strand magazine publication, I think, was 200 to 250,000 copies every issue. So it's the railways really, and W.H. Smith for stocking it originally, I would say, that made Sherlock Holmes popular. Do you think the Sherlock Holmes stories were universally popular and regarded as good literature at the time or not?
I should hope so. They're the best things I've ever read.
Well, I would agree with you. I mean, you know, they are superbly well written. They stand up today, but the answer is no. If we look at this guy, Matthew Arnold, he was the chief inspector of schools in 1880. He called them cheap, hideous, ignoble of aspect, tawdry novels for middle class people with a low standard of life. That's murder mystery novels in general, not just Sherlock Holmes ones. And it was also said in Blackwood's magazine about that time, considering the difficulty of hitting on any fancies, any plots that are decently fresh, surely this sensational business must shortly come to an end. So there was a great prediction that murder mystery novels would not last very long and we'd all be tired of them very soon. I think both those people were probably wrong, don't you think? So certainly Matthew Arnold, he looks a very strict person, doesn't he? You can just see him telling the schools what they should be stocking and what should be taught in schools. Going back to us as a Sherlock Holmes publisher, we had the added disadvantage of having to deal with this lady, Andrea Plunkett, you might remember, towards the early 2000s. There was this long bit about the Arthur Conan Doyle literary estate and whether the books were out of copyright or not. And it all to do with Jean Conan Doyle. When she died, she took back some of the copyrights, but some of the copyrights still remained in the United States. And this Miss Plunkett began making claims. She wrote to every book publisher. And every time she wrote, and she was taken to court, the federal courts, throughout her cases, but she was still fairly successful. So for instance, the BBC, rather than go to court with her and tell her to go away, they actually, when they were doing the Jeremy Brett series, they actually paid her some money. So we have this money and it's cheaper for us to pay you than to actually take you to court. And that was a very bad thing, because she then went round to other people, other pubs, said, well, the BBC has paid us some money, you need to pay us as well. And if the BBC think we have a case, then you need to pay. We actually told her to go and get lost and she never came back. And at the same time, a shop in Baker Street, there had been an estate agents who then became the Sherlock Holmes Memorabilia Company. They registered the name Sherlock Holmes as a trademark. And if you ever mentioned Sherlock Holmes in a book, they would come to you and say, we're infringing our trademark by mentioning it. But again, if you looked into the legal details, you can have a trademark for absolutely anything, but they come in two categories, and their trademark was a non-enforceable trademark. So it had no legal validity at all. So in fact, you could have a trademark called the Queen, I guess, and then every time, you know, it's mentioned about, it's a non-enforceable one. And as you probably know, copyright expires after 70 years after the death in this country. So from 2000 on, we were safe to use the name Sherlock Holmes. So as a publisher, what do we get offered? We get offered, everybody writes in and says, we have very rare unsolicited manuscript. we get these rather rare manuscripts that people say they will send to us unsolicited. They often think they want them returned at our expense to them. They say, it's my life's work. I've been working on this for 10 years, and I'm sure nobody else has written about Sherlock Holmes since Conan Doyle died in 1930. This will be completely novel to you. The worst thing is that these authors usually can't take criticism, and like me in the beginning, they know nothing about the subject, and you've got elementary my dear Watson written all over the place. They think a book gets published within a couple of weeks, when really it's a minimum 6 months, usually about 18 months, and they think they're going to make mega dollars from it. I had a guy a few years ago now who said that the least he wanted from the publication of his books was a brand new sports car. That was his aim, and I wrote back to him and said, would you settle for a bicycle, because that's probably all you're going to get out of it, I'm afraid. So what do we do with the books? We're not I'd like to think we're not a vanity publisher, and we're a proper publisher, although small scale. The first thing I do is I don't read them myself. Usually I send them off to an expert. I'm not going to tell you who they are. There's two of them, both of them very well known in Sherlock Holmes circles. One of them actually would never admit to reading pastiche. and says, oh, I don't like pastiche, but they're very, very pleased for a fee to read them for us and give us their opinion. If they've sent a stamped address envelope, we will return it to them. If not, we'll send them an email and tell them our unbiased opinion, which can be tricky to tell somebody it's actually a load of rubbish you've just written, and we don't think it'll actually sell. We try and advise them and set their expectations that they're not going to make much money from it. We tell them the timescale is going to be 6 months to 18 months, and we send them a contract to sign. And the contracts that we do these days, we absolutely insist that they should keep the copyright. I think it's so unfair that you pay some money and you take the copyright from them. Vanity publishers usually still take the copyright. We think the author should have it. And alternatively, if it is, they absolutely insist, we will publish it under the regular special press label, just for money. But we still won't publish absolute rubbish, but we will publish it as a print on demand service. So somebody might come to say, I want 250 or 500 copies of this, please just print it for us. So what are we? This is the only advert for my little company. We're not a hybrid publisher because we don't charge the author anything. We think it's fair that we should have some confidence in the author. If we think it's good enough to be published, then we should invest some of our money, and we invest in typesetting it for them, having it proofread. We don't take the copyright, and we do pay a royalty when the book gets in profit. Some never make profit. Most of them do make a profit, so the publisher should see some money back from us. We're not a full publisher because we don't pay advances to our authors, and we don't have huge budgets for marketing and so on. But at the same time, we're not a vanity publisher because we don't accept everything we're sent. We probably accept about 1 in 10 of what we sent. We're not a vanity one because we don't charge for the publishing. We don't charge for distribution. We just distribute the books. And as I said, most importantly, we don't take the copyright. We do always have the book proofread. We do distribute, publish. We usually make ebooks, audio books, sometimes large print, and we try to sell the foreign rights. But as I said earlier on, the sales are in the hundreds, not the thousands or the 100,000s. So back to what we're offered. What sort of things do, so the number of times I've seen a manuscript where it starts somewhere in the vaults of the bank at Cox's and go. So if it's that, we're probably not going to accept it. And there's the whole society, isn't there? The battered tin dispatch box is just made for those books. Or we get books that are one of those inferred cases I mentioned earlier, or the favourite of authors is to have a famous person in it. So it can be Jack the Ripper, Houdini. Sorry, we published one with Houdini, and Holmes, Dracula, Hitler. We certainly never published where he meets Hitler. Mark Twain, we did publish that one. Churchill, Faraday, yes, and the Loch Ness Monster. They all come up quite regularly. So if we see one of those, we know, well, it's probably not going to be the finest thing. Or it's some famous event. So, you know, Sherlock Holmes on the Titanic, or the San Francisco earthquake, or how he escapes from Krakatoa, or the Princes in the Tower. Princes in the Tower was an interesting one, because of course they were the 1400s, I seem to remember. But it was a retrospective of Holmes sitting there in his armchair and solving the case. In fact, that's one we did. And Sherlock Holmes in space, a little bit like Muppets in space. I suspect that wasn't one of ours. So we get those sort of things. Or it's some relation to Sherlock Holmes. So there's a whole series of Moriarty books, Mycroft Holmes, Dr. Watson, Mrs. Hudson, The Ghost of Sherlock Holmes. That's one of ours, actually. I rather liked that one. Sherlock Holmes is dead and he comes back a ghost haunting Baker Street, and he helps the new inhabitant of Baker Street, the lodger there, can actually see and hear him and gets involved in murder mysteries. And Sherlock Holmes gives him clues along the way. Inspector Strad, Irene Adler, or some illegitimate offspring of Sherlock Holmes, a daughter with Irene Adler, for instance, springs to mind. And some are better than others. I put here the Laurie King ones. She's probably done fairly better at that. So what do I have to contend with, which people send me? So when I say contend with, these are things that I have to get over, and when I do this, I generally get into my Basil 40 mode, or want to get into being Basil 40 when I read some of these things. So some examples for you. We're into the final sort of section now. So a book we actually published in the end called The Chilford Ripper, written by an American gentleman. He had the villain in a mountaintop hideaway in Cambridgeshire. So Cambridgeshire is way down in the bottom right-hand corner here, just northeast of London, in that green area. In fact, Cambridgeshire is the flattest county in the United Kingdom. Scotland up here is where the mountains are, so having the villain in a mountain hideaway wasn't quite right. So we have to tell people, and this guy was perfectly reasonable. Oh, I didn't know that. Actually, what he said was, he said, well, on the map, it seems to be close to some mountains. And I said, what mountains? The closest mountains are Scotland. He said, yeah, but it's only an inch on the map I'm looking at between London and Scotland. But he was very good, and he altered his story completely for that. We have one that hasn't come out yet, which I'm having trouble with at the moment, called the St. Giles Codex. It has, the story is fine. It's a little bit like Da Vinci Code thing, following a trail of clues starting in Edinburgh and ending in Strasbourg. But unfortunately, it has Holmes and Watson starting off on a Sunday morning at point A here in Edinburgh, travelling via London, where they stop off for lunch and a change of clothes. And on the same day, by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they're in Strasbourg, where apparently everybody speaks Italian, even though they're not anywhere near Italy. So this one needs some rewriting. And I actually did the journey. It's 884 miles on the fastest train you can get today is 14 hours by Eurostar, if you travel an average of 60 miles an hour. So again, completely impossible in that time, but you know, this guy thinks it is, and trying to convince him otherwise isn't so good. Trains have always been a problem. I mean, they were always a problem to Conan Doyle. He got his trains wrong in the Bruce Parkinson plans in the Priory School. If you remember going to Mackleton from Euston, when it would have been St Pancras, Silver Blaze, he comes back, if you remember, after the case in the corner of a Pullman carriage, when Pullman cars hadn't even been introduced in the UK at that time. So, you know, Conan Doyle wasn't the best one, I'll say. But this particular one, we had another, is a lady American author. The Stolen Cadaver has Holmes going to a very famous cemetery called Brookwood Cemetery, travelling from Paddington via Woking. He gets to Woking and then asks for directions to the cemetery, and you might think that sounds okay. We can perhaps forgive her that it would be Waterloo you would go from. Paddington goes nowhere near Brookwood, and you might think, well, okay, he could go from Waterloo to Woking and ask directions. So, however, it wouldn't show Sherlock Holmes being very observant, because he would have passed the cemetery before he got to Woking. In fact, it had its own railway station where it would have stopped at the stop before. And in fact, if you wanted to go there, I'm sure Holmes would have known of this thing up here called the Necropolis Railway, which was a special railway which ran from the side of Waterloo Station specifically to that cemetery. And it used to run funeral trains every day. So literally the coffin would be loaded, the mourners would be loaded on the train, and it would go straight in to the cemetery. So again, people need to do their research. The worst example to date, I hasten to add, was a book called God Save the Queen, and it involved a royal kidnapping of somebody called Victoria. The action took place, it said, in the swamps of Chelsea. Well, that immediately made me think there's something wrong here, because as far as I know, Chelsea didn't have swamps. We had lots of cliches. We had a fight on Tower Bridge. There was the smoke or steam coming up from underground trains. There was the stupid Metropolitan Police and the detective division. There was a secret compartment in a hansom cab which held 4 people, which they must have been contortionists, I feel. But worst of all, when I asked this person, she said, oh, well, the kidnapped person was Victoria, who later became Queen Victoria, and it's set in 1820, this book is. And I hasten to add, in 1820, the first public railway didn't exist till 1830. The first underground train wasn't till 1863. So how she had them running around London, I don't know. Metropolitan Police wasn't till 1829. The Detective Division, 1878. Tower Bridge, it'd be unusual to have a fight on there because that wasn't built till 1886. Hansom cabs, of course, were for 2 people, and there'd be no compartment there to hide 4 people in. But of course, can we see what the worst of all mistakes she made was?
1820 was the year of Victoria's birth.
Yeah, well, not only that. Well, I think I forgot when she was actually born. No, the worst thing is Sherlock Holmes wasn't around then. We all think Sherlock Holmes 6th of January 1854, so it was 34 years before he existed. So I told the author all this. She went away very embarrassed, and they said, I will rewrite my story. And I thought, good, we'll never hear again. She came back to me the following week with the rewrite. And do you know what she'd done? All she'd done was she said, it's not a Sherlock Holmes story. It's Sherlock Holmes's father who's solving the case, and get everything else in it as it was. So I'm afraid we never published that one. Then we have pure incompetence. So this is another one. I won't tell you who the author is, but it is a published author, and she had it set in Harrogate rather than Harrogate, set in 1926. Apart from Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie makes an appearance, or rather I should say a disappearance, because it's revolving around that time in Harrogate when she disappears from the Hydra Hotel. Dorothy L. Sayers appears on the scene as well. Again, there's another mountaintop lair next to the sea, but close to Sheffield. Sheffield is nowhere near the sea. It has a hotel called the Algonquin. We don't have any Algonquin hotel. In fact, the only one I know of is in New York. And this hotel apparently is dedicated to King Arthur, where there are clues. On one of the days, they go to Sheffield Park horse racing in the snow on frozen ground. Of course, that would never take place. And we should point out, as I did, that Sheffield Park is not in Sheffield. It's actually in Sussex, about 300 miles away. It's all to do with the drugs trade. So we have poppies in bloom in the book. Well, poppies don't bloom until May to June time, but this is January and it's snowing. So obviously, I suspect the poppies would be covered with the snow, but apparently they're in bloom. And the case depends on footprints in the snow, and the case is solved. And worse still, on the final day of this novel, which is a Thursday, they've solved this case the previous night. And so to celebrate, they all go for a picnic lunch, presumably in the snow. They then return to Harrogate to pack their bags. But they still managed to get down to Southampton by 4 p.m. to get the RMS Olympic, the sister ship of the Titanic, which they board and gets to New York by the Saturday morning, under 48 hours. So I know the RMS Olympic held the blue ribbon for the fastest sailing, but believe me, you cannot do the Atlantic in 48 hours. So this was, complete rubbish, really, to want of a better word. So again, we went back to the author and we pointed all this out, and instead of perhaps being a little bit remorseful, they came back and said, I'm a professor of English literature in the States where I teach students how to write fiction, and in fact I came to England and stayed in Harrogate for 3 months while I researched this novel meticulously. We also had other things like Sherlock Holmes having grits for breakfast and that. So it was, again, some people cannot take criticism. Then we get pure arrogance. So I had another one, a retired Holmes keeping bees in Exeter. We know where he keeps bees, do we not, audience? It's Sussex. Yes, that's it, on the Downs. Exeter is sort of next to Cornwall, basically, on the way going down. Anyway, he keeps bees in Exeter. Watson is retired, but he lives in Lincoln. And Holmes takes the train from Paddington to Lincoln. I can assure you it's King's Cross you go from, not Paddington's. They had that bit wrong. And this is an English author as well. Mycroft has married a 20-year-old girl, lucky old Mycroft. And in this story, he's much younger than Holmes. So they seem to have forgotten the 7-year rule, haven't they? Holmes is senile in the story, and he falls down some stairs and he gets killed. He's buried in Exeter. Watson goes to visit, and it maintains that he was a long-standing member of the Metropolitan Police and wasn't a consulting detective at all. So again, we have to go back and reject this story, and we told the guy, no, who's a retired solicitor, actually, sorry, not for us. And he said, oh, I know these mistakes, but I live in Exeter. I know nothing about London or Sussex. I've never been there. So, you know, it's my story and my characters, so I can do what I want with them. And people won't notice or care if I change a minor detail or two. So again, we get that sort of thing. To us, though, when we are about to publish a story, language is the biggest problem. And I'm going to give you a few examples now. So we have serious things like, do we use single quotes or double quotes? Do we use the Oxford comma? People get confused between dashes and hyphens. They often will put a plague rather than a plaque. In fact, in my Inspector Morse world, the local newspaper in Oxford had a headline that Colin Dexter had unveiled a plague in Oxford outside the police station. So, you know, it happens to the best of people. We often have prepositions missing. It seems to be Americans don't like using prepositions and good English. So is it a present from my wife and I, or me? Do you heat up the soup, or do you heat the soup up or heat up? So all these type of things we have to look up, accept, effect, all those type of things we have to look up. Oh, sorry, I put a comical one there, eyeliner or eyeliner. The second one, of course, is a new shipping service by Macintosh, the Apple Corporation. Waste and waste, tip and tips. Separate. The number of times I get separate spelt wrongly. And a more serious one, is it ISE or IZE? It can really be either. You know, IZE was formal English. We've now gone more to the American side of ISE in our writing. Some of our authors want to make it as if it was published in Victorian times, so we keep to the IZE. Other times we have ISE. But quite often the author will mix it up within the same novel. And then we have what I call the Dick Van Dyke School of English. If you've ever seen Mary Poppins, you will know what I mean. So we have American English versus English. So we often get pants versus trousers, vest instead of shirt, colour. So as you know, American, you don't have the you, you know, you ours. The number of times I've read a manuscript where instead of saying good morning or good day, as you should say, it's howdy, Watson. How's this morning? And the number of times I have hash browns and grits for breakfast instead of eggs and bacon. So we have to correct all of, and of course, Holmes takes the subway so often in these things rather than the underground, etc., etc. And he walks along the sidewalk rather than the pavement, etc. There is Victorian English phraseology, which we try and correct as much as possible. The number of times people trying to write like Victorian English, and they have Watson ejaculating in front of Holmes, which can bring a smile to people's faces. And then we have Holmes and Watson off to have a shag together. Obviously they mean shag tobacco, but it has a whole different meaning in modern English over here. And then there was one I put Holmes at breakfast. I've said about the eggs and bacon, but there's one famous one which I rather liked, and it had I paraphrase here, and it might not mean anything in Australia, but it has a whole different meaning in English, and it says something like, Holmes was despondent at breakfast, the case was not going well, he just played with his sausage all over breakfast. I think it translates to Australian as well. So I have to say, I'm near the end now. I have to say, we are not immune to this. I've done a lot of criticism of other people. So this is one of our books. It came out in the late 90s, I think, and here is a sentence from it midway through, which nobody bothered to correct but now. So here we are. Then Holmes pushed his coffee cup aside and said quietly to me, Watson, I feel like a walk. Come, let us smuggle our pipes and tobacco out with us and stroll near Stonehenge. It's a year or two since I have viewed it. So that's what's in the current edition. I will now put on what was in the previous edition, which nobody commented upon for nearly 20 years. It's only one letter wrong. Then Holmes and I pushed his coffee cup aside and said quietly to me, Watson, I feel like a wank. Come, let us smuggle our pipes and tobacco out with us and stroll near Stonehenge. It's been a year or two since I viewed it. I hope he's referring to Stonehenge. It's been a year or two since he viewed rather than anything else. So you see, even the best of us can make mistakes. And I think to finish off with, I had three others. Oh, you've just got the first one, I see. A few others. These were ones from, because the rest of the world isn't immune either. And here are three that I decided to tell you about. One involves me. Martina Navratilova, I hope you remember her as a great tennis player. Won many Wimbledon single finals, and one of those was again reported by the BBC. Again, I never forget, it always brings a smile to my face. The BBC reported that Martina Navratilova had won her latest singles final with straight sex. Which given her actual choice was quite fun. Of course, it should have been straight sets rather than sex. I know you Australians, apparently you play cricket over there from time to time and are quite good at retaining the ashes, I seem to recall. One of our famous commentators, Richie Benno, was commenting on a match, and he was commenting about the wicket keeper, and he meant to say the wicket keeper is now crouching as if sitting on a shooting stick. You know what a shooting stick is? You know, the stick that unfolds and has a, and what he actually said was the wicket keeper is now crouching as if he's sitting on his shitting stick, which went live on the BBC. And finally, one from me, from BASF, a big chemical company, largest chemical company in Germany. When I was a young scientist, I was in charge of scientific support. And this guy, Dr. Lawrence Sigler, director, sent in a support request, a very technical science question. I didn't know the answer myself, so I merely wanted to reply by email and say, dear Dr. Sigel, thank you very much for your email, which I have passed on to somebody else who's more expert, who will get back to you in due course or whatever. And obviously, I don't know if you know, on your emails, you generally have your signature file set up, so it'll automatically say best regards, Antony Richards or whatever at the end. And I think you know what it's like when you're halfway through writing an email and you get sidetracked. And on this case, I was sidetracked before I'd finished the email, and I pushed the send button by mistake. And again, a very minor mistake. What I actually sent this director at BASF was the following: dear Dr. Sigel, thank you very much for your email, which I've just pissed on. Best wishes, Antony Richards. I had to make a very quick phone call to Germany to apologize to him. In fact, he saw the funny side of it, and we became good friends afterwards. So how do I conclude? My conclusion as to how not to publish things is, it's not an elementary thing, my dear, but publishing Sherlock Holmes books, it is fun, it is interesting, and it is in Australian, certainly time to throw a shrimp on the barbie and ask, I hope I got that right, and ask any questions. I've put some contact details there if any of you want to contact me. There's my thing, AR@Crime for you, especially if you've got that great novel that you want published. Be very pleased to hear from you. Better still, if you want to buy something, you could go to Baker Street Studios, or if you want to browse the books we have, you could try either Breeze Books or in regular special press, and we'd be delighted to see you. And a couple of pictures of me just to prove that I did go on the Queen Mary and had to prance around for a few weeks at a time dressed as Sherlock Holmes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. You've certainly laid bare the trials and tribulations of a small-time publisher. I think you've cured any of us who want to take on publishing, but we're certainly glad that you do it. And as an aside, we also use the term Sherlockians in Australia rather than Holmesians, because we are also the more informal type. So we call ourselves Sherlockians. But a wonderful presentation, full of detail and full of anecdotes that made us all laugh. Thank you very much again, and I'll throw the screen open to anybody to ask you questions.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I note that on all your screens at the background, when you're doing your Zoom, you all like to have bookcases in the background, don't you? And I chose Baker Street instead. So I'm just going to change my screen to be a little bit more appropriate for you, if I can find it, because I do have, there we go. So I will join you as well with our book collection in the background.
A very impressive looking bookcase.
Yeah, actually it's not mine, it's the Royal Institution of Great Britain library.
I do have a question. I would not know whether it would be better to refer to myself as a Sherlockian or a Holmesian. Very random question, so I apologize. But I'm not sure which is the more accurate, because I am British, and you were right, I don't dare refer to Holmes by anything but his last name. However, being a member of this society,
I personally don't think it matters what you refer to him as. I think he'd be flattered to know that all these years later that people are still talking about him and are enthusiastic about him. Conan Doyle might not agree, because of course Conan Doyle tried to kill him off. But I think we should be flattered that there's anybody of any interest at all.
oh, and by the way, you spelt Martina Navratilova's name wrong.
Oh, I was just seeing if you were following. No, I will change that the next time I have to. I thought he looked funny. I should have looked it up, shouldn't I? I do apologise.
Yes, there was it should have had an NAV, Navratilova.
Yes.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what, I will treat this. Oh, yes. Navratilova, right? It's been changed. It's all right for the next time if I ever have to give this again. There we are.
Very good.
Can I ask, Antony, what your Breeze Books bestseller is? What book is your bestseller?
Oh, okay, the ones that are the bestseller ones are those by Roger Rickard. He sells more than anybody else. If you see his, and of his ones, the bestseller, and one that I personally quite like, was he brought out two. They were so long I had to put it into two, which was his Sherlock Holmes, The 12 Days of Christmas. And if you remember the carol, I guess it's a carol, the Christmas song, The 12 Days of Christmas, you're on the partridge in a pear tree, to whatever it was, 5 gold rings, etc., etc. He did a story, a short story, 50 odd pages for each of the 12 days of Christmas. So there had to be one which involved a partridge in a pear tree and so on. He wrote those, and that has sold, certainly towards Christmas time each year, more than virtually all the other books that are put together. And they're quite nicely crafted stories as well. So that, I would say, is probably our best selling one. And Roger's a lovely guy as well. And when he writes, we have Zoom meetings with him, and we go through all the Americanisms that we then change before it's proofread. So yeah, he has quite a following now.
Thank you.
That of course is not to say you shouldn't buy all the others as well.
Right.
No, we do have some that I'm not going to tell you which ones they are, but I would personally avoid myself. Some are perhaps of the older ones that we inherited from Brews books.
And you haven't considered doing a Sherlock Holmes meets Katie Price book to capitalize on the celebrity, you know?
Well, I'm sure if I could contact her, I'm sure she would write one for us. It would be, you know, book number 43 or 4. I can't imagine what the front cover illustration would look like on it at the moment, or even the title. I'm not sure we could think of something.
Anthony, can I ask, do you have any comment about pastiches that perhaps don't have Sherlock Holmes in the title, but have something like what Antony Horowitz wrote, I think, you know, with the Moriarty stories or things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't, this is going to sound very strange, I don't read a lot of Sherlock Holmes books myself outside of the ones I'm forced to read for the business. So no, again, I just go back, I don't mind that at all. As long as they're well written and they have a good story, it can have anything in it. And as I said, everybody has different preferences. Some wouldn't touch a parody one or a pastiche one. Some are very great purists, but you know, there's something for everybody. So I personally don't mind at all.
Okay, I think that might have dried everybody up. Thank you, Anthony. It's certainly kept us something to think about. Just the effort you go through just to produce a book and then make sure it's going to be bought by people because it's interesting enough and correct spelling and all that sort of stuff. So I'm sure there's a lot of work goes into the preparation before a book is actually done. So nobody else got any more questions where we might think about calling a day or a night or an evening?
Yeah, I'll go back to bed, shall I?
What do you think about having an agent before you actually get an editor or go to a publisher? Because I'm halfway through writing something at the moment, or more than halfway.
Well, it'd be a very good idea, but if you're an unpublished author, I very much suspect it'll be very hard for you to get an agent before you can. There's very few Holmesian, Sherlockian authors who do have agents. And of course, as a publisher, we sort of act as the agent for the people who come to us. But by all means, try and see if you can get an advance or something, which, as I said, is very rare. See if they're, but I'm bound to say, unless you're a big name with an idea for a Holmes book, it's unlikely, and you'd end up with somebody like us who would say immediately, yeah, we would act on your behalf, but you'd need to send us the manuscript first, or your partially finished manuscript, and we will judge whether we think it's any good or not. And then usually you would say something like, if it is good, yeah, we'd like to see the full manuscript when it's done, and then we'll talk to you again without any obligation. So yeah, if you can get one before you've written it, excellent.
Right.
But it's probably not what you wanted to, probably not the answer you wanted.
No, that's fine. I'm just looking for information. Yeah, thanks.
But, sorry, I'm looking at the background. So you've got a rather nice certificate on the wall there in the background.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's my, it's a College of Physicians. Yeah.
Ah, okay, because the crest on it, it's blurry here, look like a University of London crest, but
yes, it does. No, but it's Royal Alexandra Hospital for Children in Sydney. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
It's a college, though. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good.
Okay, we might call it a day. Thank you again, Anthony. It's been a marvellous presentation. So much detail there. It's incredible. I don't know how you keep up with it all. So thank you very much from all of us.
A pleasure.
Thank you, everybody who participated and joined us today. It's been wonderful to see you all. Hope your day or night turns out lovely for the rest of the time. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.
Look forward to it. Good day.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks again.
Goodbye.
A pleasure.
Bye.
Bye, Bill.